I had never believed in love at first sight. I thought it was something people wrote about in books, something girls sighed over in movies. But that was before Rowan. The first time I saw him was at the wedding reception, my mother's second chance at happiness, and my own first step into a world that would never belong to me. I should have been smiling, but I felt like an intruder, standing among strangers in a room filled with too much light, too much laughter. And then he walked in. "Alistair, this is my son," my new stepfather said, pride warming his voice. "Rowan. Rowan." The name was sharp, cutting through the noise around me. He gave the faintest nod, dark eyes flicking toward me with cool disinterest before drifting away. His hair fell in careless waves, his suit fitting him too perfectly to be accidental. He didn't try to command the room, but he did, effortlessly. And I was already gone. Moving into Rowan's house felt like stepping into someone else's life. The halls were polished, the ceilings high, the paintings expensive enough to make me nervous just walking past them. My mum seemed thrilled, glowing with her new husband by her side, and I tried to mirror her happiness. But every time I carried another box into my room, the truth pressed heavier on my chest. This wasn't home. Not really. I was arranging books on my shelf when Rowan passed by in the hallway. He didn't look at me. He didn't even slow down. Just the quiet sound of his footsteps and the faint scent of cedar cologne brushing the air. My throat went dry. I wanted him to notice me, and I hated myself for it. Dinners became a silent battlefield. Our parents tried to bridge the distance. "Rowan, why don't you tell Alistair about the school?" his father prompted one evening. Rowan didn't look up from his plate. "He'll figure it out." "Rowan," his father warned. Rowan's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "What? It's true." Heat crept up my neck. "It's fine," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. "I'll manage." I kept my eyes on my food, but I could feel him watching me then, calm, assessing, like he was measuring the weight of my presence in his house. At school, his name carried weight. Rowan Hawthorne. Top of his class, captain of the fencing team, impossible to approach. Some called him cold, others said mysterious. Either way, people hovered around him, trying to win scraps of his attention. He gave them nothing. And me? I was just the new kid, the stepson, the outsider. I told myself to focus on blending in, on surviving. But it was impossible not to notice him. The way he moved through the corridors like he owned them. The way teachers softened their tone when he answered. The way girls trailed after him, giggling too loudly, only to be met with a glance that left them breathless. He didn't see me. Not really. And yet every stolen moment I caught. The sharp set of his jaw, the flicker of irritation in his eyes when someone pushed too far, the rare softness when he thought no one was watching, pulled me deeper into something I couldn't escape. I should have hated him. Instead, I was falling. One night, I went to the kitchen for water and nearly walked straight into him. He leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone, the glow of the screen cutting across his features. His expression was unreadable, his presence filling the room like gravity itself. "Sorry," I muttered, reaching for the cupboard. He didn't move aside. He just looked at me, eyebrow raised, and said coolly, "Do you always apologize for existing?" The words cut sharper than they should have. My fingers tightened around the glass, my chest burning. I wanted to snap back, to tell him he wasn't the king of this house, but the weight of his gaze pinned me silent. I fled to my room instead, heat crawling under my skin. Why did it matter what he thought? Why did his words make me feel like I had to prove I belonged here? Because it was him. Because I had already given him too much power. And he didn't even know. Days bled into weeks. Our parents were blissfully unaware, caught up in their own happiness, while Rowan and I orbited each other in uneasy silence. I learned his patterns without meaning to. The sound of the shower at dawn, the scratch of his pen when he studied late into the night, the low music he sometimes played behind his closed door. I was ashamed of how much I noticed. Ashamed of how much I wanted. It was late one evening when I lingered in the living room, homework spread across the table. Rowan came in, dropped his fencing bag by the sofa, and collapsed with a sigh. For once, he looked tired, vulnerable, less like the untouchable boy everyone admired and more like someone my age. "Long day?" I asked before I could stop myself. He shot me a look. Not sharp, not dismissive, just unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Yeah. It was one word, but it felt like a victory. I clung to it, replayed it in my head as I lay awake later that night. That single crack in his armor was enough to keep me hooked, Enough to feed the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as unreachable as he seemed. But hope was dangerous, because every time I looked at him, I knew. I had already crossed a line I couldn't come back from. The moment that sealed it came weeks later. It was raining, the sky heavy and gray, when our parents announced we'd all have dinner together. A proper family night. Rowan didn't argue for once. He just sat there, silent, his dark eyes occasionally flicking toward me. Halfway through the meal, his father asked, "Rowan, have you been showing Alistair around?" Helping him settle in. Rowan set down his fork, gaze sliding lazily in my direction. "He hasn't asked." I bristled. "I don't need a babysitter." Something flickered across his face then, amusement, maybe even challenge. His lips curved into that almost smile again, and the air between us thickened, charged. Our parents kept talking, oblivious, but I couldn't breathe. His gaze held mine too long, too steady, until I had to look away. My pulse thundered in my ears. That was when I knew. I had fallen the moment I met him, and I was still falling, deeper every day. Rowan didn't feel the same. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I couldn't stop. And if he ever looked at me the way I looked at him, I didn't know what would be left of me. Living with Rowan was like living inside a storm that never broke. The air around him was heavy, charged, full of a threat that never quite revealed itself. He never raised his voice, never lost control. But the way he looked at me, the way silence stretched when we were in the same room, it was enough to make me feel like I was always on the edge of something. Breakfasts were the worst. I'd sit at the long dining table with my cereal, while my mum hummed cheerfully, sipping tea. Rowan would come down the stairs in that crisp uniform, tie knotted perfectly, hair falling just so. He never looked rushed. He never looked unprepared. He sat across from me like a king holding court, cool and untouchable. "Sleep well, Alistair?" my mum would ask brightly. I'd nod, spoon halfway to my mouth. Rowan's eyes would flicker to me then, just for a second. Not kind. Not cruel. Just measuring. Like he was calculating how much space I took up in his world. "Yes," I'd answer quickly, too quickly, and he'd look away as though the exchange bored him. It shouldn't have mattered. He was just my stepbrother. But every clipped word, every careless glance, dug into me like a splinter. School wasn't much better. At first, I thought I could disappear into the crowd, be the new kid no one noticed. But being tied to Rowan made that impossible. People whispered when they learned I was living in the Hawthorne house now. Some girls tried to ask me questions, hoping for a way closer to him. Some boys eyed me with suspicion, as though I was trespassing on territory that wasn't mine. The only relief was Thomas. He was in my literature class, messy blonde hair, easy grin, the kind of boy who didn't care about Rowan or reputations. He slid into the seat next to me one morning and said, "You look like you could use a friend." I blinked. "Is it that obvious?" Painfully. He laughed, unbothered, and passed me a spare pen. It was simple, but it meant more than I could say. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like I could breathe. Rowan noticed. Of course he noticed. The first time Thomas walked me out of school, Rowan was waiting by the gates. He leaned against his car, one hand in his pocket, posture casual but eyes sharp as knives. "Hey," Thomas said, slowing. "Is that your brother?" "Stepbrother," I corrected quickly, pulse jumping. Rowan's gaze landed on me, cool and steady. He didn't acknowledge Thomas. He didn't have to. "You're late," Rowan said, voice even. I bristled. "I don't need an escort." "Didn't ask if you did." His eyes flicked to Thomas, then back to me. "Get in the car." It wasn't a request. Thomas raised his brows. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Yeah," I muttered, climbing into the passenger seat. The door shut with a thud, and Rowan started the engine. The silence was suffocating. Finally, I snapped. "You didn't have to be rude." "I wasn't," he said flatly. "I just don't like people who waste time." He wasn't wasting time. "He's my friend." That made him glance at me, just briefly, but there was something sharp in his eyes. "You think he cares about you?" "He's only curious." That's what people are. Curious. They get bored. I clench my fists. "You don't know him." Rowan's lips curved, not quite a smile. "And you don't know me." The rest of the drive was silent, but my heart pounded the whole way home. It kept happening. Whenever Thomas lingered by my locker, Rowan appeared. When someone else tried to sit with me at lunch, Rowan would drop into the seat across from me without a word, scaring them off with nothing more than his presence. At home, it was worse. One evening, I was finishing homework at the dining table when Rowan came in, dropped his bag, and leaned against the chair opposite me. His eyes scanned my notes, then me. "You spend a lot of time with him," he said suddenly. I looked up, startled. "With who?" "That boy. Thomas." I swallowed. "He's my friend." "Is that a problem?" Rowan tilted his head, studying me with unnerving calm. "Depends. Do you actually like him?" My chest tightened. "Why does it matter?" His mouth curved again, that almost smile that never reached his eyes. "It doesn't." Then he walked away, leaving me staring at my half-finished essay, heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. But the truth was I could explain. Rowan didn't want me to have friends. He wanted me to orbit him, just like everyone else did. And the worst part, a piece of me wanted to obey. The breaking point came one Friday night. Mum and Mr. Hawthorne were out at some gala, leaving the house quiet, shadows stretching across polished floors. I came home later than usual. Thomas had dragged me to a cafe, insisting I needed more fun in my life. When I pushed open the front door, the lights were off in the living room. For a second, I thought the house was empty. Then I saw him. Rowan sat in the armchair, one leg crossed over the other, face half lit by the glow of a lamp. He wasn't reading. He wasn't on his phone. He was just waiting. "You're late," he said. I froze. Deja vu. His tone was calm, almost casual, but my stomach twisted. "I was out. With him?" The question cut too cleanly. I tightened my grip on my bag. "Yes. With Thomas. You don't get to police that." Rowan rose slowly, smoothly, like a predator unfolding itself. He crossed the room, closing the space between us until I had to step back against the wall. "I'm not policing you," he said softly, almost kindly. "I'm asking." My pulse hammered. "You're not the boss of me, Rowan. I can go anywhere I want." Something flickered in his eyes then, dark and dangerous. He braced a hand against the wall beside my head, caging me in. His other hand brushed my wrist. Barely a touch, but enough to send heat rushing through me. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was a whisper now, low and rough. "You shouldn't let people think they can have you." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" His face was close, too close, his breath warm against my skin. His eyes burned into mine, unblinking. "Because you're mine." The words shattered the air between us. My heart stuttered, my mind blanked, every nerve alive with something I couldn't name. And then, the sound of keys in the front door. Our parents' voices drifting in. Rowan's eyes lingered on me a second longer, sharp and unreadable, before he stepped back. His mask slid neatly into place. By the time our parents entered the living room, he was across the room, lounging in the armchair again like nothing had happened. I stood frozen by the wall, my chest still heaving. "Everything all right, boys?" Mum asked cheerfully. Rowan didn't look at me. Perfect. But his words still echoed in my skull, burning into me, impossible to forget. "You're mine." I couldn't stop thinking about it. The words Rowan had whispered that night, "You're mine," haunted me, and yet, in the daylight, he acted as if nothing had happened. Nothing. No explanation, no admission, no acknowledgement. Just silence. And that silence, it was eating me alive. I ran a hand through my hair, tugging at it in frustration. I had tried so many times to get him to say what he felt. But Rowan, he just wouldn't. Every attempt I made was brushed aside with a shrug, a look, or a carefully neutral response. My frustration grew until I realized I had a choice. Wait for him forever, or stop waiting. Maybe I should move on, I thought bitterly. I hated that thought immediately. Hated it. I didn't want to move on. But Rowan's silence had stretched too long, pressing against my chest, making me suffocate. That's when Lucas invited me to hang out. Just a casual thing, nothing serious. I accepted. Not because I wanted him, but because I needed a release, a little reminder that I could make a choice. The cafe was buzzing with sunlight and chatter when I arrived. Lucas waved immediately, grinning in that open, easy way that made him seem harmless, almost charming. "So," he said, leaning slightly forward, "I didn't know you liked this place. The pastries are amazing." I forced a polite smile. "Yeah, I come here sometimes. It's nice." Lucas leaned in a little closer, eyes bright. "I'm glad you agreed to come. Honestly, I wanted to get to talk. Like really talk, not just the little stuff between classes." I felt a twinge in my chest. He was attentive, genuinely invested, friendly. But every smile, every compliment, every slight lean of his body reminded me of what I really wanted. And it wasn't him. It was Rowan. Lucas reached for the menu, then paused, looking at me with curiosity. "You're quieter than usual." Something on your mind? I shook my head, forcing the smile wider. No, just thinking. He nodded, still cheerful, but I noticed the slight flicker of curiosity in his gaze. He leaned a little closer. Well, I hope it's not something bad. You deserve to enjoy this. I wanted to tell him the truth, that my heart wasn't in this because it already belonged to someone else, but I couldn't. I nodded, letting him take the lead, laughing politely at his jokes, pretending to be fully engaged. By the end of the date, I felt a small, uncomfortable weight in my chest. Lucas had been attentive, friendly, even mildly invested, but every part of me had drifted elsewhere. To Rowan, to his dark eyes, his smirk, the warmth of last night's confession, and the memory of his lips on mine. When I got home, the weight in my chest didn't fade. I opened the door to my room and froze. Rowan was sitting on my bed. Calm. Casual. But I could feel the tension radiating from him. So, he began, tone deceptively light. Where did you go? My chest tightened. He was here, in my room, waiting for me. Why do you care? I blurted, sharper than I intended. Rowan's eyes flickered, hurt, frustration, and something darker. Because, he said slowly, I don't like the idea of anyone else being near you. My stomach flipped. My defenses faltered. You were jealous? I asked, disbelief and something warmer creeping into my voice. Rowan's gaze softened slightly. Yes, I was. Seeing you with someone else, it hurt. You're mine, Alistair. I've always been yours, even if I don't say it. I swallowed hard. Frustration, longing, and desire collided in my chest. You should have said something sooner, I whispered. I tried, he murmured. I didn't want to scare you away. And then instinct took over. I leaned closer, and our faces were inches apart. Our lips met, softly at first, testing, then with growing urgency. My hands gripped his shoulders lightly, his slid to my waist, pulling me closer. It wasn't just desire. It was relief. It was confirmation. It was the culmination of weeks of tension, confusion, and unspoken words. When we broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing uneven, Rowan's voice was low and hoarse. I can't lose you, Alistair. Not to anyone. You won't, I whispered. I'm yours too. Always. We stayed like that for a long moment. Lucas, the minor boy date? Completely forgotten. Irrelevant. Nothing mattered but us, tangled, raw, and real. I pressed a soft kiss to his temple. No more silence. No more keeping things from each other. Rowan's eyes softened. No more, he echoed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile, warm peace. We had crossed a line, confessed, survived the tension. There would be challenges ahead, of course. There always were. But for now, it was just us. And I wanted it that way. The morning sunlight crept across my room, brushing the edges of my bed in soft gold. My body felt heavy, but not in the way exhaustion usually feels. It was a pleasant heaviness, the kind that comes after a night of emotional release. I blinked against the light and became aware of Rowan beside me, his arm draped lightly over my waist, his breathing slow and steady. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just watched me as I stirred. And for some reason, that quiet presence made my chest tighten, made my stomach flutter in ways I couldn't quite name. I wanted to smile, to reach for him, to pull him close, but I hesitated. Rowan's calm, quiet intensity had become something I craved, something I needed. And yet, I was still wary of pushing too far, of doing something that might shatter this fragile peace. You're awake, he said softly, voice low, almost careful, like he didn't want to startle me. I am, I murmured, forcing my voice to sound casual. Morning. Rowan's lips twitched in a small, almost mischievous smile. Morning. Slept well. As well as I could, I said, letting a half-smile escape. Considering. I didn't finish the thought, didn't need to. Considering Rowan had spent the night beside me, considering the confession, the kiss, the tension, all of it lingered in the corners of my mind. He reached out instinctively, brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead. The gesture was gentle, almost tender, and my heart thumped harder than it should have. You look better when you're not pretending, he murmured. I laughed softly, a little nervously. I wasn't pretending last night, though part of me wondered if I had been, pretending not to care, pretending that Lucas' date had meant anything, pretending I could ignore Rowan entirely. Rowan's gaze sharpened, almost imperceptibly, as if sensing my thoughts. Good, he said, and just like that, the calm intensity returned, pulling at something deep inside me. The walk to school felt strange, new, and yet familiar. I could feel him beside me, subtle but grounding, and every brush of our hands, Every slight movement seemed deliberate, careful. There was electricity there, quiet but insistent. My heart thumped every time our arms brushed, and I caught myself imagining him leaning just a little closer, just a little more. Rowan seemed aware of it too. I could sense the vigilance in him, the way his dark eyes scanned the hallways, the slight tightening of his jaw when someone glanced at me. It wasn't aggression, not yet. It was something deeper, a quiet, possessive vigilance. I wanted to tease him, laugh at it, brush it off. But the truth was that it thrilled me. It made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Classes dragged by in a blur, my mind constantly wandering. Rowan's presence hovered near, even when he wasn't directly beside me. A subtle brush of his hand, a lean in when I spoke, a fleeting look of frustration or curiosity. It was enough to keep my attention split between the lecture and the tension building silently around us. At lunch, a few classmates noticed. Whispers floated over the cafeteria noise. Some glanced our way, others exchanged quiet guesses. Rowan didn't flinch. He leaned slightly closer, brushing his shoulder against mine. My pulse jumped. It was a subtle claim, a gentle reminder that he was here, that I was his, even in public. I wanted to savor the moment, to let it bloom quietly in my chest. And yet, part of me still carried the lingering weight of yesterday, of Lucas, of that minor tension that reminded me how much I had risked to get Rowan's attention, to hear him say the words I had craved. I belonged to him. Always. The afternoon brought the first real test. A class project required collaboration with Lucas. I hadn't expected this, a cruel twist almost, to test the new boundaries of Rowan and me. Lucas greeted me cheerfully, leaning slightly closer, his tone light and interested. "Hey, Alistair. Ready to tackle this project together?" I nodded, forcing a polite smile, feeling the tension coil inside me. He leaned in when I spoke, laughed a little too much at my jokes, complimented my ideas with enthusiasm. It was harmless. It was friendly. But Rowan's absence from the table, sitting just a few desks away, jaw tight, made my chest ache in a way I couldn't ignore. I found myself laughing politely at Lucas, nodding, playing along. But my mind was elsewhere, constantly drifting back to Rowan. The thought of him watching, waiting, silently judging, and feeling jealousy like a weight pressing on my chest was almost too much. Lucas noticed my distraction. "You seem distracted," he said, voice softer now, genuinely curious. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "No, just thinking." He nodded, but the curiosity didn't leave his eyes. He leaned closer, a playful attentiveness in his posture. "Well, I hope it's not something bad. You deserve to enjoy this, you know?" I wanted to tell him the truth, that my heart wasn't here, that it was already claimed, that I wanted Rowan and no one else. But I couldn't. I nodded, letting him steer the conversation while I smiled, laughed, and quietly cursed myself for pretending. By the end of the project, I felt a strange relief. Lucas was a nice guy, attentive, slightly invested, harmless. But my thoughts kept returning to Rowan, to his dark eyes, his possessive intensity, the memory of last night. When I returned home, I opened my door and froze. Rowan was on my bed, casual, calm, as if he'd been waiting the whole time. My pulse quickened immediately. "So," he began, tone deceptively light. "Where did you go?" My chest tightened. He was here, in my room, waiting. "Why do you care?" I asked, sharper than I intended. Rowan's eyes flickered, a storm of hurt, frustration, and intensity all at once. "Because I don't like the idea of anyone else being near you," he said slowly, deliberately. I felt my chest twist. You were jealous?" I asked, half in disbelief, half in a rush of something warmer, something I hadn't wanted to admit even to myself. His gaze softened just a fraction. "Yes. Seeing you with someone else, it hurt. You're mine, Alistair. Always." I swallowed hard. Frustration, longing, and desire collided in my chest. "You should have said something sooner," I whispered. "I tried," he murmured. "I didn't want to scare you away." The words struck me like a bolt of lightning. And then instinctively I leaned in. Our lips met, softly at first, tentative, then with a growing urgency. My hands gripped his shoulders and his slid to my waist, pulling me closer. It wasn't just desire, it was affirmation, it was relief, it was the culmination of weeks of tension and silence. When we broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing uneven, Rowan whispered, "I can't lose you, Alistair. Not to anyone." "You won't," I replied. "I'm yours too. Always." We stayed like that, letting the quiet settle around us. Lucas? Forgotten. Irrelevant. Nothing mattered but us, tangled, raw, and real. I pressed a kiss to his temple. No more silence. No more keeping things from each other, I whispered. Rowan's eyes softened. No more, he echoed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile peace. We had confessed, survived, and found each other. There would be challenges ahead. Of course there would be. But for now, it was just us. And I wanted it that way. It had been a week since Rowan and I confessed everything. A week of stolen glances, quiet touches, and hand-holding in hallways where no one was watching. A week of feeling my chest tighten whenever he wasn't near, and warmth whenever he was. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, while Mom prepared breakfast. Rowan lounged on the couch, his book open, but his dark eyes flicked toward me often, alert and watchful. Mom paused, her hands stilling on the chopping board. Her gaze lingered on me longer than usual. "Alistair, can we talk for a moment?" she asked softly. I swallowed, feeling a flutter of nerves. Rowan glanced up from his book, raising an eyebrow, but didn't move. "Sure, Mom," I said, trying to sound calm. My stepdad leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his brow slightly furrowed. "What's this about?" he asked, tone casual but with a hint of skepticism. Mom gestured for me to sit. "Just a conversation," she said gently, "about something I've noticed lately." I felt Rowan shift slightly behind me, quiet but supportive. My heart thumped. "Okay," I said. Mom began, her voice calm but intent. "Alistair, I've noticed the way you look at someone lately. The way your smile changes, the little touches, and the way Rowan seems different around you. I think it's time you told us the truth." I felt my cheeks heat. I glanced toward Rowan, whose dark eyes were focused on me, quietly reassuring. "It's true," I said softly. "We're together." My stepdad straightened, eyebrows raising. "Together? Like what exactly?" I swallowed, feeling the weight of his skepticism. "Like boyfriend and boyfriend," I said quietly but firmly. "We're dating. We're honest with each other, and we're happy." There was a pause. My stepdad rubbed his chin, still unsure. "I don't know. I just want to make sure this isn't a phase. You're both still young. Feelings are strong, but life can be complicated." I turned slightly, Rowan's hand brushing mine lightly, grounding me. "It's real," I said, meeting my stepdad's gaze. "I've never felt like this with anyone else. And Rowan feels the same. We're honest and we respect each other." Mom reached over, resting her hand on mine. "I can see that. And I support you, Alistair. I just wanted to hear it from you. To hear that it's real and that it's making you happy." Relief and warmth spread through me. "It is," I whispered. "I've never been this sure of anything in my life." Rowan stepped closer, eyes soft as he looked at my parents. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting us." My stepdad exhaled slowly, still hesitant but softening. "Well, as long as you're serious and as long as you're honest, I can accept that. But I'll be keeping an eye on you," he added, attempting a stern tone but betraying the faint amusement in his voice. I laughed softly, feeling the weight of a week's tension lift. "We will," I promised. Later that afternoon, Rowan and I were alone in my room. I perched on the edge of the bed, while he leaned casually against the doorframe, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You weren't kidding," he murmured. "They're okay with us. Both of them." I laughed softly. "Yeah. I didn't expect your dad to come around so quickly, though he was skeptical at first." He grinned. "A little skepticism is normal. Makes the acceptance feel earned." I nudged him playfully. "A little," I said, feeling the lingering lightness from Mom's support. No more secret glances, no more whispers. We could just be. Rowan reached for my hand, holding it firmly. "Promise me we keep being honest with them. And with each other," he said softly. "I promise," I replied, warmth blooming in my chest. The rest of the week passed in quiet bliss. We cooked meals together, shared private jokes, and wandered the hallways at school hand in hand, smiles exchanged, no longer hiding. Even Lucas felt like a distant memory, irrelevant now. One afternoon, walking home, Rowan rested his head lightly on my shoulder. "You know," he murmured, "I like this. Just us. No tension, no secrecy, no games." I smiled, feeling that familiar warm flutter in my chest. "Me too. I didn't realize how exhausting hiding everything had been until now." He chuckled, low and teasing. "Guess we should thank your mom," he said thoughtfully. I laughed, pressing my head closer to his. "Yeah, thanks, Mom," I whispered. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. The world outside moved as it always had, chaotic and unpredictable. But inside our small bubble, we had something steady, something real, something worth holding on to. Rowan glanced at me, eyes dark but soft. I returned the look, and no words were needed. We understood each other completely. We were together, accepted, and nothing else mattered. That night, lying in bed beside him, I let myself feel it fully. Peace, love, and quiet exhilaration. Mom's support and my stepdad's eventual acceptance had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd carried. No more secrets, no pretending. Just Rowan and me tangled, messy, and finally free. I pressed a soft kiss to his temple. "We're lucky," I whispered. Rowan murmured back, "Yeah, we are." For the first time in a week, I let myself believe this. Us could be real, enduring, and unafraid.